Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Derek VanRiper here with Tim Heaney. It is Tuesday, August 22nd. It's that time of year where I keep forgetting what day it is. Like, even on the weekends. I woke up early Sunday morning, and it was like 5 a.m. local time here in Madison. My dog, she just doesn't sleep as late as I would like her to. For a while, when she was a really little puppy, she'd sleep into like 7 every day, and that was, to me, that was gold. Lately, she wakes up at like 5:30, take her out, make her go back to sleep before we feed her, because if we feed her, she's going to be full of energy. And she wakes me up early all the time, and I just lose track of what day it is because my sleep is just so broken up compared to how it used to be. Like, I never was awake at 5 a.m. in the last 10 years, and now I'm awake at 5 a.m. pretty much every day. But anyway, it is Tuesday. I'm confirming that it's
Good
Tuesday.
Start.
Great start to the very cool story, bro. If you like this podcast, despite that cool story, please consider giving us a nice rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher. Thanks to those of you who've already done it. We want to go straight to the top of the leaderboard eventually. So if everybody who listens and likes this podcast leaves it a review, we might actually be able to take down, a Colin Cowherd or something. That'd be a crowning achievement.
It's always
positive.
positive.
Yeah, absolutely. We gotta knock out the Fox Sports crowd. Like, we gotta just get ahead of them. We gotta be better than those guys. Social media, lots of ways to connect. At RotoWire, at RotoWire MLB. He's at Tim_Heaney. I'm at Derek VanRiper. Also search RotoWire on Facebook. Hit the like button on the page and interact with us that way as well. Emails, of course, always welcome. FantasyBaseballPodcast@gmail.com if you'd like to contact us there. Finally fixed some of the settings on that, so I get the proper notifications when stuff comes in. So hopefully, going forward, that will be constantly monitored instead of semi-constantly monitored. Another cool story. All right, news time. Steven Matz going to have surgery to repair ulnar nerve irritation in his pitching elbow. He's been pitching hurt all year because, well, he's a Met, Tim, and Mets always pitch hurt all year. I believe this is the same problem that Jacob deGrom had to have addressed a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. So
I believe you're correct, yeah.
With Matz just being completely off the rails and not good this year, you have to give him a pass. And at one point, he was messing with his pitch mix. I think it was the breaking ball that he was changing up. Nothing this year matters as far as Steven Matz goes. It's all about how healthy he is going into 2018. And DeGrom's recovery is at least an encouraging sign. DeGrom's pitched pretty well overall this year. So with that, I'm somewhat intrigued by the idea of Matz as a guy that's probably going to go after pick 300 in drafts in 2018, with the chance of returning pretty good value. I mean, the only real knock on Steven Matz throughout his career has just been his difficulty keeping his arm healthy.
Yeah, you figured there was some other physical ailment, the way the K per 9 really just tanked this year. It's, was it 2 per 9 fewer than last year on average? That's, that's a sign that something's been bothering him. And yes, I did confirm that the DeGrom injury was the ulnar nerve. And that happened last fall. So that's like you said, that provides a decent timetable if it's corrected for Matz here. No reason to push him this year. It was a good decision by the Mets. We don't usually say that about the the health determinations with the Mets, but this, you're right. It's promising that they're addressing it now before the offseason hits us. And, like many Mets pitchers, we might be buying low on Matz and finding ourselves pretty pleased in 2018. I just want to see how the skills do recover and how his pitches look in the preseason if he's back in time for that. So, just chalk up another Mets guy that, is burning people, but who could be good next year.
Now, Matt Harvey's rehab work has progressed up to AA, and it did not go well on Monday. He allowed 2 runs on 4 hits, walked 1, struck out 3 in 3 innings, 54 pitches, gave up a home run along the way. We haven't seen Harvey pitch in a game for the Mets since June 14th, so still maybe a start or 2 away before they bring him back. But September, I think it's very reasonable to think that the Mets are going to see what they can get out of Matt Harvey, see where he's at as he works his way back from this shoulder injury, and try to get a feel for what they could have on their hands with him in 2018.
Yeah, I think Harvey's kind of different than Matz, where they really do need to, as you said, see where to go from here with him. We've talked about in the show the speculation that maybe Harvey in the long run could be a good bullpen guy, a good closer type. But yeah, nothing to play for. let him see what he can work through with this. The thoracic outlet thing is just, becoming one of the bigger injuries for baseball in general for pitchers. The Tommy John, talk about, that being a historic precedent of having disastrous results. Thoracic outlet's probably, maybe Jeff Stotts can talk more about this better than I can, but it seems like it's going to be one of the more concerning injuries that we'll have to watch for in the coming years for baseball, unless they really find a good procedure that really can cover that. But yeah, Harvey's the real turning point of his career for the Mets. Among these injured starters or whatever you want to call this glut of people. But yeah, Harvey's the one I think we're really going to have to watch the most as the season ends.
I really hate thoracic outlet syndrome. And I've probably mentioned this on the pod before. My wife has had it for, it's been like 7 years now, I think, since she was diagnosed with it. It's still a problem. Like it's just incredible what it does. And I mean, we're talking about big league pitchers who have some of the best medical care in the world. And even in the case of my wife, she's got a great PT that she's been working with for a while. And it is a slow road to recovery when you don't have the constant attention and treatment that a big league pitcher can get. But we've seen it end so many careers. We've seen some guys come back and not really be themselves. Others just don't make it back at all. So I think Matt Harvey, as far as your 2018 wild cards go, pretty high up on that list in terms of not knowing what to expect. If we're able to see him make a handful of starts even in September, maybe that will shed some light on just where he's at physically as he continues to try and get right health-wise going forward. Alex Wood pitched last night against the Pirates. I liked him quite a bit from a daily perspective, and it didn't really pay off, but he's going to have to skip a start or two, it sounds like, due to the recurrence of a sternum joint issue that bothered him earlier this season. This according to Ken Gernick of MLB.com, so a DL stint seems almost certain. Although this is the reminder, we're getting close to that point when rosters expand in September. For players who are going to come back this season, the DL almost goes away. Maybe it'll be a little different with the 10-day DL, but when the rosters are that big, teams generally don't even bother. So Wood might be one of the last few guys we see who actually makes a stint on the 10-day DL. They need him to be healthy in the postseason. He's going to be an important part of what they do in October, and with that huge lead that we've talked about so many times, there's no reason at all to push Alex Wood out there unnecessarily in late August and early September when you could give him some rest and make him more effective when you need him most.
Yeah, 20.5 game lead on the division and, 14 or whatever on the top spot. They're not rushing Alex Wood back. We talked about the Dodgers, how they've worked the 10-day DL system pretty well with their group of pitchers. We make it sound like they were just kind of, gaming the system, not doing much, but they did have some significant injuries mixed in there as well. And I think Wood is, besides Kershaw, being the 1B number one of this staff this year with his breakthrough, it's and you talk about already the fact that he increased his innings again, becoming a full-time starter this year. That's another thing that can come into play with this whole thing to conserve his innings. So combination of factors. If you own Alex Wood in a shallow league, this could stretch on for a few weeks, even if he's okay there. They'll probably give him a few more starts, all things equal, if he does rest up okay. But it's one of those roster trimming situations. As you said, if there's no DL in the major league, if he doesn't get placed on there for some reason, you're going to have to do a little bit of extra monitoring with this whole situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you are trying to win a title right now, and Alex Wood has helped put you in that position, you're going to be scrambling for some help in the short term, but possibly for the bulk of September. Some good news, though, from the Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw, through a simulated game on Monday, I think he even talked himself into an extra inning. He was supposed to throw 3. He talked himself into a 4th, or talked his coaches, rather, into a 4th. So Kershaw is going to go to Oklahoma City on Saturday, so pretty good news for you if you're in that area. 4 innings, 60 pitches on tap, and after that could be a return. It looks like September 1st against San Diego is the day that we might get Clayton Kershaw back into our fantasy lineups.
A good day that will be.
That will be a very good day. I saw it on the Brewers game last night. I was just watching the game late, and they flashed up the NL wins leaders, which, you always love a good wins leaderboard, but Clayton Kershaw still atop that list at 15, despite missing some time here with this back injury. But certainly good news that he's progressing this quickly, because in Kershaw's case, you're not worried about Kershaw the same way you're worried about Alex Wood in a year-over-year innings context. And I think with Kershaw, you want to make sure he's able to go through the rigors of pitching deep into a game without having a setback. If you do that early in September, maybe you back off a little bit middle and later of the month where he only goes 6 innings each time out. Preventative maintenance then, but the full test maybe upon returning or soon after.
Yeah, other concerns there. Kershaw's just kind of getting him back into postseason shape, which some might argue is not the greatest shape it could be for him. But either way, they will, like you said, kind of test him a little bit and then see where they can cut his workload in games that really don't mean anything, which most of them don't for them at this point.
No, they won't have any meaningful games for a little while yet. Andrew Miller re-injured his knee last night. I thought this would be kind of plug and play once he came back. Unfortunately for the Indians, it might not be. He thinks he's going to be okay and will avoid the DL this time, but that is, of course, to be determined and not entirely up to Andrew Miller to decide, unfortunately. He missed most of the first half of August as a result of suffering that injury back on August 1st. I think he got hurt while pitching against the Red Sox and then got hurt again pitching against the Red Sox last night, so that's pretty weird. Carlos Santana left with back tightness. Santana's one of those players, you talk about the short list of guys you rarely talk about this season. I don't think I've brought up Carlos Santana more than once all year. I traded for him in the stake league, so maybe I was talking about how I made a deal for him then. Otherwise, more of the same really from him. 250, 355, 18 homers. He's actually scoring a lot of runs. 74 runs scored, 64 ribbies. Kind of a sneaky, solid player. And he's not doing it with the same power numbers we saw a year ago when he hit 34 home runs, which is probably going to be a career high that stands for him forever. But he's 5 steals. He just does a little bit of everything, and a 250 average really doesn't hurt you that bad in today's environment.
I was just thinking the same thing before. I don't think we've talked about Santana once this year, and I'm like, but there hasn't really been much reason to. It's just one of those stability assets that just kind of hovers around top 150, top 200. Where you're like, all right, not much to say about him. Same guy every year. Great OBP. That's going to help you everywhere. And, I'm like, oh, wait, we haven't talked about him at all. So, with that consistency with this back tightness, you never know. If the Tribe extends their lead and they don't really need him as much, another one of those guys that could just be kind of playing 3 games a week and then rested just to keep him conserved for the postseason as well. But, a little less power this year in that sense. But otherwise, still a nice place and a good lineup. Just, keeps you floating in the team-dependent run and RBI categories.
In other Carlos-type news, Carlos Gomez slated to swing a bat Tuesday for the first time since going on the DL. He's targeting a return Saturday. I think that's the first day he's eligible to come back since they backdated his DL stint once they made that move. Carlos Gomez actually having a pretty nice resurgent year on a per-game basis. He's only played 86 games due to injuries this year. 15 homers, 11 steals, 251 average, which for Carlos Gomez, if he's in the 250s, you're probably pretty happy with the combination of power and speed that he's bringing to the table. But that level of production, if you kind of project it over a full season, you're probably high 20s in the home runs and maybe close to the low 20s in steals. So that's a nice player for what Carlos Gomez was considered to be a huge bust over these last 2 years, especially when he was with Houston.
Yeah, the ROI was much better this year than it has been. I've been on the Carlos Gomez train for a long time at various prices. I've taken him the first round when he was that level. I've taken him, in the 4th round or whatever last year when it was like, okay, let's ease off, but there's still the potential there. This year it was dirt cheap, and you couldn't help but buy. The people complain about not having enough speed. You take guys that have double-digit stolen bases either way. Gomez isn't going to be the guy with 40 stolen bases anymore. He's going to be 32 in the winter, but there's that combination of everything. The power speed really works, and for where he was going, top 150, top 200 pick, he's delivering on that. Even with his struggles, so a guy that can really help you down the stretch. But you got to say it'll be interesting to see how they'll fit everything in with Delano DeShields playing the way he is.
Yeah, DeShields chipping in a lot of steals right now for owners that are scrambling to address that category. Gallo got banged up though too. He ran into Matt Bush, or Matt Bush ran into him rather, over the weekend. So I think that kind of frees up
maybe it's an easy switch
right now. And until Gallo returns, he's been showing concussion symptoms. So he's technically day-to-day for now, but I think a DL stint is almost certain with Joey Gallo at this point. There's no reason to push it if you are the Rangers. Miguel Sano hit the DL, and it sounds like it's going to be more than the 10-day minimum, just based on the way Jeff Stotts wrote him up in his latest article. So you look at what they've got behind him, it's not much. It's Eduardo Escobar and Ari Adrianza. I mean, it's not anything you get excited about. Sano for the season, average up at 267, already up to a career high in 28 home runs. He's scoring runs, he's driving them in. He still strikes out a lot, Tim, but as far as guys that hit the ball hard and when they connect, they max out value, Miguel Sano's been doing that this year.
45.3% hard contact will do that.
Yes, that goes a long way.
And love the walks, too. I mean, it's not going to deter me, even regardless of what he does this year, it's not going to deter me from making him like a top 5 third baseman maybe next year, maybe top 10 safe filler. But OBP, that's a lot of juice going there. So yeah, very, very pleased with what he's done so far.
In a traditional league where you use batting average,
maybe less.
Do you think Miguel Sano cracks the top 50 overall in ADP?
With power the way it is, I'm not certain. It's because the overload we have at third base this year, at first base, the corner infield in general, does have so much depth where you might want to take a better batting average asset there, unless you plan your team to go average early and then you need power later. It's a really contextual situation for me, but yeah, it's definitely going to be a good fringe topic for that, for the top 50 overall. But you're talking pure power. Few guys at that range are going to be as good.
Maybe he returns to his 2016 ADP. I think he was going like top 75 pretty consistently going into last season, and then fell quite a bit going into this one. Masahiro Tanaka coming off the DL to start against the Tigers here on Tuesday. You look back through his game log, some pretty interesting performances sprinkled in this season. But more recently, you look at his last 10 starts. 3.54 ERA, 108 whip, 75 strikeouts in 61 innings. He's allowed 10 home runs during that span. But if you only walk 13 guys and you're striking that many guys out, you can get away with giving up home runs. So Tanaka, I think he's fixed after a pretty bad run through the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah, we talked about it. A lot of it's just getting the sink back on the splitter and then all that stuff. The downward moving pitches. Command is still great. Over 4. K to walk ratio. That's excellent work. The home runs, that's mostly due to what he was doing early in the year. I think he's pretty much back to what we would expect him to be. Top 25 starting pitcher, probably more at this rate, this pace he's going to finish the season. It could definitely, this sample could be a lot better than we saw. It's one of those cases where you gotta look past that 4.92 seasonal ERA and kind of see what he's done lately. And with the way pitching's been this year, you're welcoming this kind of resurgence. Late in the year.
It seems like the skeptics for Tanaka, who were always kind of just saying, you know what, I'm worried about the arm. He's got the partially torn UCL. I'm waiting it out. A lot of the skeptics were finally on board this year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take?
For sure. Do
you think he goes earlier or later than his ADP from this year? I think it goes around 80 in the NFBC. And if it's one direction or other, or it's not the same, how much of a shift do you really expect? How much do you think he rises or falls based on how he's finishing this season?
Yeah, I think we still have a little bit of time for that to kind of develop. And, if he gets home run problems again, I could see it moving downward. I hope, for next year, I hope he actually does worse to finish the year because I want him next year in that kind of big group of people that are going to be, the guys that everyone fanned on this year. And, because pitching the way it's fallen, you're going to have those top elite guys, maybe the top 10, maybe if you want to stretch it that far, and then have a just giant pile of people that are going to be very similar. I think Tanaka could rise out of that pile if he does well this year, but I want to buy him a little lower than what this form could be for him. So, as a fantasy guy, I hope he doesn't do so well. As a Yankees fan, I hope he does well to finish things out. But yeah, I'm. Then again, do you buy high and then you're ignoring the elbow issues and then they resurface at the end of this next year when we buy high on him. I hate doing that, putting too much stock into a player with that existing problem, but it might not be a problem. Who knows? So, another X factor wild card like Harvey, but with a little more stakes behind him. Yeah,
I think with Tanaka, if I had to guess today, and with a month and change to go, things can change. I would look at it as probably like a 40 pick drop in ADP. I think he's going to go around like 120. So at the end of round 8, start of round 9, that's probably where you're going to get Tanaka. Could be the kind of player, and we've talked about a few other guys like this in the last couple of weeks. If you're doing a draft in the end of September, October, November, if you're one of those early drafters, you might get a bigger discount on him then than what you're going to get in February and March. Everybody realizes just how good the second half has been for Tanaka.
Absolutely, and you love the fact that the fastball velocity is up. Looks like almost a career high like that. So, his current form, if he keeps this going, it's going to be a little more expensive than we want for ROI purposes, but still a very good arm to have at the top of your deep fantasy rotation, maybe not your shallow one.
Remember Garrett Richards? He's working his way back from a nerve problem in his biceps. He felt good after throwing a simulated game Monday. He is scheduled for another simulated game Friday. Probably going to throw about 40 to 45 pitches. From there, the Angels will determine the next step in Garrett Richards' rehab. One of those players that you kind of forget about just because he's made a total of 7 starts since the beginning of the 2016 season, but a guy that's very talented, as we saw in 2014 when he had the full breakout, and even the follow-up in 2015 in the current environment with the way pitching has gone this year. We'd happily take the 2015 version of Garrett Richards back in the pool if he can get healthy.
Yeah, the K per 9, walks per 9 of that 2015 year, not the greatest looking thing, but the guy with this much downward movement on his fastball, the great ground ball ability that he can induce, high velocity, which you don't always want to buy high velocity, but high velocity with ground balls. That's a pretty darn good combination to buy into. I wasn't as aggressive as others were last year. I do want to see it more where he develops an approach where he can work deeper into games. Sometimes, he does kind of gas out a little bit because he does have that high velocity. But, the guy that many people will forget about again and that you buy low on, and he could really, he'd be paying off more than like a Tanaka where he's already going to be established. Richards could be a guy that could win a lot of leagues next year if everything breaks right, because he's got so many great pieces. They just haven't manifested at the same time throughout his career at all.
Let's talk about a few other kind of pickup type guys. Chris Stratton probably drawing some interest to pitching well against the Nats, and then going 6 scoreless again last night against the Brewers. Only 1 strikeout in last night's game against the Brewers. Had 10 Ks against the Nats. And that's probably where some of the stream appeal came from with that start last night being at home in San Francisco. I don't really see it with Chris Stratton. He's 27. I know there's some pedigree there, but other than throwing him in there for home starts because the park can offset so much of the damage that contact would normally cause against him, I'm not seeing anything. Is there a reason to be optimistic about Chris Stratton?
Well, not if you're chasing wins with the Giants.
No,
that's a really bad idea.
Win probability's low. The Ks probably won't be there. The 10 he had against the Nats might just be a career high. Like he may never match that again against anybody. I am just not looking to do anything with Chris Stratton right now if I can help it. That's a very desperate sort of call, despite the fact that he's had success against 2 contending teams in his last 2 starts. Quick follow-up on Johnny Cueto. He was scheduled for a rehab start at AAA Sacramento on Monday. He had to be scratched from that due to illness, so whether it's another day or 2, that remains to be seen. But he's expected to make 2 rehab starts before returning to the Giants. Kind of like Matt Harvey, you just want to see Cueto get back in September, make even 5 starts, and just get a read on whether or not he's going to enter this offseason with a little bit of positive momentum, because it's been a surprisingly bad season for a guy who I thought was really safe as like a top 10 starting pitcher on draft day.
Yeah, I was trying to buy low on him before this injury stuff started. The home runs have been probably the worst he's ever been in his career. Maybe back when he was with the Reds it was a little worse, but definitely you figure he has the skills to make his own wins, regardless of what we talked about with Stratton before. He can go deep into games normally. I got to wonder how long the forearm's been bothering him. That might have affected the home run stuff together. The Giants don't have much incentive to rush him back, but they've been kind of running Bumgarner out there, just kind of get his confidence back heading into next year. Maybe they'll do the same with Cueto moving into next year, because that bullpen also, not the best bridge ever for the Giants. But yeah, definitely a guy that you chase. If you're in a quality starts league, you want Cueto to come back for sure. But yeah, I would be all about trying to see where it goes. If I had him on my team and I was making a run for things.
Let's talk about Nicky Delmonico for a second. Big pickup in a lot of leagues. He's 25 years old, a former 6th-round pick, 6'3", 230, lefty bat, getting an opportunity to play every day, even getting some run in the cleanup spot right now for the White Sox. I think when you look at Delmonico, it's kind of easy to say, hey, no, there's not that much there. He's a little old, and don't get too excited. But that's a bad take. I think when you look more closely at this guy's pedigree, he's one of those hit-first prospects. And I think this is something that I want to look at more closely going forward. But if you read like the Baseball America prospect book and you see the prospect grades, a lot of 45s, a lot of 50s in the book. And if you see that grade, you often just say, okay, that guy's not going to help me from a fantasy standpoint. But if you have a 45 or a 50, and the bulk of that grade comes from what the player does with the bat, and everything that keeps him from being like a 60 comes from having a mediocre arm or being a below average runner, things like that, it doesn't matter as much. Like if you have a good hit tool and you've got pop, just getting into a lineup somewhere sometimes is all you need. So I'm looking at Delmonico, and I'm pretty curious to see how this plays out the rest of the season. He's showing a pretty good eye at the plate, plenty of pop. He's feasting on some bad pitching. Like there's no doubt about that. That Texas series and the doubleheader against the Twins yesterday, some of the pitching matchups he's had have been really favorable, but he's making his layups. He's the guy that's taking advantage of this opportunity, and the K rate's low, the walk rate's high, and the power's good. So I think he's worthy of a pickup, maybe even in 12-team leagues right now for this stretch run.
And he's on the perfect team to get this chance. The White Sox are just seeing what sticks to the wall. I mean, it worked with Matt Davidson earlier in the year. That was a hell of a power source out of the gate there. They find one now that's very similar. It's funny, when I didn't know much about Delmonico before he started all this. Like, the first impression I would get from hearing the name is just like this scrappy little guy, like reminds me of someone from the Bronx or something like that from my native New York. And like, hey, Nicky Delmonico, he's scrapping his way to the major leagues here. But no, you look at him, he's actually kind of, as you said, physically impressive. There's a good run of power in short sample sizes as he's climbed the ladder. So that there's something there. I don't know about the stolen bases translating to the major leagues because, maybe there's some athleticism there that he's hiding. But yeah, at bats will be there. Matt Davidson coming back will take over third. Delmonico, it's like this. He'll probably stay at DH at least majority of the time. Left-handed hitter, that helps him there. 15-teamers have to jump on him at this point, at least to try him out in like a utility spot. But yeah, the White Sox, they keep discovering these guys that are at least somewhat useful for the rest of the season. Kind of have to ride the wave with them.
He's been in their system for 3 years. Delmonico was with the Brewers. Didn't play in the spring of 2014 due to some personal issues. Got a 50-game suspension for amphetamine use later that season. Just kind of has bounced around a couple different organizations. I want to say originally was with the Orioles. Had trouble with a knee injury. Had a concussion in 2013. I mean, a little bit of everything has gone wrong for him. So at 25, you could be quick to write him off and say, oh, well, he's 25. I can't buy in. A lot of things have slowed him in his development. Some of that, of course, his own fault with the amphetamine suspension. But nevertheless, a guy that I think you want to be interested in and invested in down the stretch for the potential in his bat, because he could have a spot going into next year. I mean, I don't know if they're going to keep him as a left fielder or mix him in at DH or how they're going to make it work, but the White Sox have spots to fill as they go through their rebuild here in the next couple of seasons, and Nicky Delmonico is going to be an exciting temporary piece, at the very least, for the White Sox. Let's get to some mailbag questions here. A lot of questions today, which is great. This time of year especially, it's good to know what the listeners, what you guys want us to talk about, because we're just pushing for titles, and for people who are maybe out of the mix for a championship, they're still here looking for advice for next year, trying to make the right adjustments to do better in 2018. Shimmy sent in a bunch of great questions, so we're going to get to a lot of those. One of the players he brought up in his email was Kyle Hendricks. And we know the ratios were just off the charts good. One thing the Cubs had last year as a team was a very low batting average on balls in play. The defense was just outstanding behind the Cubs pitching staff, and even with that, they seem to have good luck along with it, because their team BABIP was about 25 points better than any other team in the league. So you look at that and you say, okay, even if the defense is still good, some more runs are going to be scored against the Cubs in 2017. With Hendricks, the jump has been, I think, bigger than most people would have expected, from 2.13 in the ERA last year to 3.52. The whip has gone from below 1 to 1.27. More walks than I ever would have expected from Kyle Hendricks, Tim. I think that's where the skills have actually eroded a little bit. The home runs are up for everybody league-wide, so I'm not looking at the jump in Kyle Hendricks' home run rate and necessarily pinning that on him, but part of it might just be that he's lost a little bit on his fastball. He didn't have a lot there to begin with, so his margin for error with fastball velocity has always been small. So between the walks, the reduced fastball velocity, and the uptick in home runs that we're seeing for a lot of players, it's been a disappointing year for Kyle Hendricks. Do you see him bouncing back down the stretch and looking ahead to 2018?
Yeah, it's a lot of pieces in play here. You know, the velocity drop, his changeup played really well. You know, when it was 88 to 80, the velocity difference, and now it's like, you know, 86 miles an hour to 78. They're going to see it better. It's not going to be as effective. His first strike rate is way down. Getting ahead 0-1 is very important for someone like Hendricks, and he's really hasn't been doing that. It went from 68.6 last year to 61.5% according to Fangraphs this year. Not a great combination. He's a guy who really needs to work around the corners. And the fact that he hasn't been doing that has also led to more contacts on pitches where he'd hoping for, you know, to get people to kind of, I guess, have more framing help in that sense. 10% swinging strike rate last year, 8.2 this year. Another very bad drop in that case. Still someone I want to buy low on because, you know, even as the question even here mentions Kyle Hendricks, you know, the tunneling with his pitches has been a very often talked about skill for him. You know, there's a lot of research. I think, you know, I'm not the person to talk about this as much as others, but that seems like an area that we need more research on as an industry, as to whether that really matters in most cases. Hendricks was a guy that I was thinking was going to drop off, and, you know, it's happened. But he's a guy I want to buy low on next year if people are going to be against him and not really chasing him as hard.
Yeah, I think it's more of a deterioration in stuff than hitters adjusting to him, though. I think that's where the problem is with Hendricks, and I think he's going to be on that short list of players that when you're looking for significant changes in spring training, you're looking for the velocity to come back for him in his spring outings next year, kind of looking ahead to that or down the stretch. That'd be a good sign, of course, too, to see it happen in August and September and possibly October as well. But Zach Davies also included in Chimmy's email. 2016, of course, very good. The whip was a lot better than it was this year. ERA just below 4. I think the second half was also good for Davies, if I'm not mistaken. Some thought he could maybe take a Kyle Hendricks-type leap. It didn't happen. I don't think it ever will happen. Mm-hmm. But as we've seen, you can have a guy like Davies go through a run where he's really effective. He's on one of those right now. His last 7 starts, including last night, a 191 ERA, a 115 whip. It's just that these lower velocity starters, and Davies throws a little harder than Hendricks, they rely so much on location, movement, they're umpire dependent, and when they catch too much of the plate, they get punished even worse than guys that have premium stuff when those guys miss their spots.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to the Hendricks conundrum here. I was never the biggest Davies fan. I was like, okay, maybe the ROI, the real profit, could be in an NL only league, where that's real, his stuff will matter. I mean, he has 14 wins this year, so I guess you can't really say that there's nothing to it. But I think that's more offense based. I would love to see where he stands in run support. Among starting pitchers in the league. But as a skills pitcher, I'm not really that enticed by him. I need something, I want to get some more concrete stuff to really, really go trust him in mixed leagues.
Yeah, I've been frustrated by Davies this season, and even with the improvement down the stretch, I don't think I'm going to look at him much differently than I have in the past. I mean, he's going right around pick 300 this year on draft day. Probably falls 50-plus spots off that. Could be a filler. But a guy that I think with a lot of Brewers pitchers especially, I really have a hard time rostering pitchers who I don't like at home. Because Miller Park, as we know, is a park that boosts up offense, home runs in particular. And there's a pretty strong home road split for Davies right now. He's sitting with an ERA close to 6 at Miller Park, 252 on the road, 115 whip on the road. Last year that wasn't the case. It was flipped, so it could just be noise. But I don't feel great about throwing Davies in a lot of his home matchups. And I think that's what makes him so difficult to own in pretty much any mixed league format.
Yeah, he doesn't have the skills that counteract his home park either. So
right, yeah, he's not. I mean,
like you Darvish or something like that at Arlington, you can see the case, but yeah.
Andrew McCutcheon, another question Shimmy wrote in about: did either of us get him? And where do you go from here? Like, what kind of discount were you getting? And what are you thinking comes next for Andrew McCutcheon after a 2017 season in which he's really bounced back? I mean, he's looked more like the player he was in 2015. The home run total has already matched what he did in 2015. The steals are back. He's got 10 steals in 121 games. And the batting average is back up in the 280s after a year where he fell to 256.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit to any mistakes you call me out on for fantasy, but I will say that I was very bullish on McCutcheon. I was very happy I was. The big thing with him was the lower body strength was kind of there. He had a little bit of injuries or something, and then his infield fly ball rate was at a ridiculously above level career high at 12.6. He hadn't really passed 9% in any of his recent seasons before that, and that's back down this year. That tells you he's driving the ball better. He's getting square contact. The hard percentage rate is not to the degree where you think that, but I would love to see the StatCast numbers behind this because it really he looks like he's a vintage player right now. The fact that maybe his defense is playing a little better has mentally affected him too or whatever, but not striking out as much. The walk rate's up. It's just everything's kind of coalescing in the right way for him. So yeah, I don't know about buying him high next year because the discount was like around the 50s or something in my NFBC. Draft Masters where I got him, so he's been really one of the crutches for that league for me. So yeah, I don't know if he's back to like a top 3 rounds type of guy, you might not get the ROI you want from that.
No, I don't want to pay any more than people were paying for him this year. Yeah, I was wrong about him for the record. I didn't really see the bounce back coming. I was worried that the K increase was just kind of part of what he had to do to maintain the power, since the batting average had been down in 2015 as well. I mean, he used to be a guy that would compete for batting titles. Really nice rebound from Andrew McCutcheon. The Pirates have a team option on his contract for 2018. I'm assuming they're going to pick that up now. I mean, depending on what they want to do with their roster in the offseason, maybe he's a guy that gets moved prior to the final year of his deal. I think the non-fantasy relevant aspect of this, depending on what kind of league you're in, if the Pirates were to trade Andrew McCutcheon, it would make more sense for a team to trade for him in the offseason than during the season, because if you trade for him in the offseason, you can give him a qualifying offer after 2018 and get a draft pick compensation once he leaves via free agency. So keep that in mind, too, as the Pirates might be able to find more willing buyers in the offseason with that little caveat on there. And in most situations, Andrew McCutcheon would get an upgrade in terms of his home park. I mean, PNC is not a great place to hit, so...
Nope.
It's better for lefties than righties, especially. So I think McCutcheon is the kind of guy that could get a little more of a floor bump if he's able to land in a more hitter-friendly environment in the final year of his deal.
Yeah, you want to counter age with that too, but like you said, if it's a good park, that can negate that effect as well. So yeah, and like you said, I think if this year's ADP repeats, I'm okay with it. So,
but I think people are going to nudge him back up because he's been a star.
Yeah, well, that's a mistake, I think.
You guys can beat me. With Andrew McCutcheon, you can beat me next season. That's fine. If he's going in the top 50, fine. You can have him. I'll find something else to do in that spot. The last question from Shimmy pertains to the Arizona Diamondbacks and their bullpen. And you talk about teams that, some people expect them to take a step forward or to rebound. I don't think anybody expected them to make the playoffs. And because they were buyers, of course, getting J.D. Martinez, their chances of getting a wild card are pretty good. So you watch this team, and you're still kind of amazed that Fernando Rodney is their option to close out games. To his credit, Rodney's pitched better lately. Over the last month or so, 13-3 strikeout to walk, only 1 homer allowed, 3.12 ERA, 1.15 WHIP. But for the season, the ERA is close to 5. The WHIP's at 1.26. He's 28 of 33 in save chances, but he's 40 years old. He's not going to be their closer next year at 41. Is Archie Bradley a guy that you're going after right now, thinking that he will actually close out games, or are you fearful that they're either going to consider multi-inning relief or possibly sliding him back into the rotation?
The latter. I keep hating to harp on like the Dylan Betances, Chris Davinsky types, but they're becoming such a more prevalent role in the major leagues right now. Bradley could have a great career as that guy. His former prospect stock might push them to have him as a starter, maybe, but I think he should be kept as a reliever either way. But maybe to have him team controlled, they might not want to give him too many saves, like the Yankees are probably discreetly doing with Betances, even though that's changed recently with the Chapman injury and poor play. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, David Hernandez always lurks if they really want to go back down that road. He's been really good this year, former Diamondback as well. Jimmy Sherfy, I think that's how you pronounce it, just got a little bit of talent to him as well. Maybe Bradley sets up those guys as that really, really nice bridge. you buy skills either way, and Bradley's skills are worth buying. So maybe you own him just for the keeper league, just for that sense to begin with. So definitely a fluid situation. There's a lot of decent relievers available next year in free agency. Wade Davis, Addison Reed, however you want to judge his performance, former Diamondback as well. One bullpen to watch for sure. But Bradley would be the best guy, I think, in this case to buy, not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think when I look at a team like Arizona, I'd be surprised if they spent their money that way. I think with the Mike Hazen-led front office, they're in much better hands now. I think payroll is still important to ownership too. So if Hazen's only going to have a small amount of money to use on the market, I really don't expect him to use a lot on a premium closers. I mean, they can't upgrade the spot. I mean, they're going to lose the contract of Rodney at $2.75 million. Mm-hmm. Maybe they spend more than that. But they're not going to be the kind of team that if the market bears 3 or 4 years for a guy like Wade Davis at $12+ million a year, I don't see the D-backs being a team willing to spend that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I believe Martinez is a free agent this year, so maybe they spend a lot of that money re-signing him. But I wonder how much the rest of their offense is locked down, because they have a lot of flexible guys like an Owings or something like that, and I don't know if Pollock's available, but they might not have much money to spend on offense, so maybe they do have to spend on the bullpen if anything else. But yeah, I would love to look at the contract situation and see what the deal is. That'll tell a better story of what they want to do with the money.
Glad you asked. I got it pulled up. Zach Greinke, $34 million next year, and that much or more every year through 2021. So that's pretty expensive.
They're top trade candidate, I would imagine. If anyone wants to take him on, yeah.
I've been adamant that if Greinke pitched well this year, that the Diamondbacks would be wise to flip him for almost anything. It's not even about the talent return. It's about finding a team with more money willing to take that on, because Greinke, might be good for 2 more years. Maybe he's good all 4. You don't want to take that risk though if you're Arizona. If you have one player who accounts for 1/3 or more of your payroll, you really don't want that to be a pitcher in his 30s.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're looking at maybe if the Yankees were their old Yankees, they would take it on in a heartbeat. But you're not so sure with this organization.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, I've said this before on Short Hops with Bernie Pleskoff, when you look at the Diamondbacks, if you flipped the numbers for Greinke and Paul Goldschmidt, you wouldn't think twice about it. If Paul Goldschmidt were owed $34 million a year for the next 4 years, say, that's what an elite player costs.
That's offense, though. So,
but the 5-year, $32 million extension that Paul Goldschmidt got several years back is worth less than what Zach Greinke made this year alone.
Talk about one of the best values in baseball.
Yeah, good work by the front office at that time for locking up Goldschmidt at an affordable price, $11 million next year. And then there's a club option in 2019, so he's still very affordable. But paying Goldie is something they're going to have to think about at some point in the not so distant future. But yeah, I think a guy like Scherfy's kind of interesting. I mean, he had a lot of success at AAA this year. Might be a little bit of a sleeper. I mean, they could end up finding some kind of scrap heap reliever. They could make a deal with one of those middle infielders. They have pretty good depth in the middle infield, so I could see them yet again flipping a middle infielder for an arm that they turn into a closer.
Yeah, that's dealing from depth. That's the way to get things done.
Thanks for the question, Shimmy. You mentioned Aroldis Chapman in passing, currently out at the closer role. And Girardi saying he'll use him at any point. I think I saw Chapman pitching in like the 5th or the 6th inning not that long ago. It was like a couple days ago. What do you think is the reasonable timetable for Aroldis Chapman to start getting saves again for the Yankees? Like, when do we see that happen?
It was so funny. I said I wasn't worried last week, and then just the barrage of the injury and even more bad outings just came after that. So I'm like, I'm happy to talk about it again this week to correct my position. But I think it's going to be at least a few weeks. Betances-Robertson combination, that's a good one. To piece those guys. The Yankees having that deep bullpen gives them options. They're not going to care about your fantasy team. I don't think Girardi works that way. Even though they did give Chapman the money earlier this year, they're at the point where they have to go with what works, and Chapman's not working. So, yeah, I think you have to hold Chapman either way just for the strikeouts. But if you need saves, I don't know. Very interesting conundrum to have. But I do think he'll get back in there in September at some point. I don't know if it's going to be immediately September, but yeah, you hold him for the strikeouts either way. But those shallow leagues, 10-teamers, very interesting to see what happens in a couple weeks if Chapman's not back yet.
It's amazing to me as somebody that went pitcher.
Chapman
was that 4 pitchers, pitcher in the NFBC. That of the three of the 4 missed significant time or lost their job as closer when it was the first two closers off the board. Kenley Jansen's been fantastic, so hopefully nothing bad happens to him.
Yeah,
like
he has control, so that's working for him.
I'm worried though. I'm just worried because of what's happened to everybody else as part of that strategy so far. Mm-hmm. I got another question here in the mailbag from Doug, and it's just kind of a general question about what do you do in a dynasty league when you're looking for pitching? Like, how willing are you to give up more established bats for younger pitching that could continue to be undervalued for years? Guys like Paxton and McCullers are really difficult right now because they've got that top 10 starting pitcher sort of upside, but they've both been plagued by injuries. Like, what have you found that works well in keeper and dynasty formats, acquiring players like that?
Well, I find it really hard to trade a first or second round bat for an established pitcher most of the time. We're coming back around to what I used to do, like, don't trade for starting pitching in dynasty if you can. You maybe have to go back to that adage to be a year early on guys, because the acquisition price is low, and the hype isn't on them yet, and it's hard to do that because fantasy players are getting more knowledgeable as the years go by because there's so many more resources available. Yeah, if you want to talk about it, you look at age, you look at pitch count, innings count, any significant growth in a certain statistic year over year. If the swinging strike rate gets a lot better over 1 year, but his ERA hasn't shown it yet, like a Taijuan Walker whose ERA, a type of that guy that might be hiding skills beneath a bad ERA. You get ahead on that and buy low on a guy. Guys coming off bad years but have experience, that's a really good one target as well. It's really no concrete answer. And how deep is your league? Another thing. So you kind of have to put the best of those pieces together to make the best, jigsaw puzzle of what would actually work for that setup. And yeah, I can't give a general answer, but definitely a case where you kind of have to see where you can get profit on a guy, and however you're acquiring somebody is very important.
I mean, I think the one thing, if you're in Doug's position in a lot of leagues right now, not even keeper leagues necessarily, it's been difficult to make deals for pitching. Like even just depth pitching is hard to get because some teams don't have any. I think what we have to do is kind of adjust in our heads the value of the bats, because it's always easier for me to move a pitcher and get a bat that I like back in the return. Like every time I'm trading for a pitcher, I feel like I'm taking on more risk.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is, hitting's easy to replace, like relative to pitching. Like I'm more comfortable digging around in the waiver wire and finding a hitter to fill a spot than I am throwing the darts out there at some of the lower end pitchers that are available as free agents. So I think we have to look at it and say, I think Ryan Zimmerman is a top 50 hitter right now. I'm going to give him up for top 75, top 80 pitcher. Like, and again, on the overall cheat sheet, you're kind of giving up value, or at least it seems like you're giving up value. But maybe we have to look at it more in the case where we're just wrong about how pitching should be valued. Like that seems almost likely to me at this point.
Yeah, the baseline definitely is lowering these last couple of years. I agree with you there. I mean, in single year, I totally agree with that strategy. I totally agree with trading the hitter for the pitcher in a single year because, you trade for Zimmerman if you want to take the Zimmerman for Strasburg risks, I guess maybe something like that would be good because you're getting, maybe getting 4 or 5 starts out of Strasburg, at this point at least. That might be enough to change your strikeout, change your wins. How much you have to move in a single year league in certain categories definitely plays into play. But dynasty, I trust hitters more so in the long run because there's a bit more repeatability. There's a more solid skill foundation because pitchers, we're getting to the point where a lot of the mid range guys are getting a little bit more volatile again because of the offensive increases. So, I'm not going to trade a top hitter for a Paxton or something like that in a dynasty league unless I'm really, really flush at a position. So we're back to that point. I think we have to start mining for skills again with some of those lower pitchers and really just kind of buy low on certain guys to really secure them at a low price for the long term.
Yeah, it's really difficult to do. The other thing I would think about too in a keeper league, instead of going for the flashy younger pitchers, try to find the established veterans that people are maybe a little afraid of in those formats because those guys start to be undervalued, and you have to be willing to whiff on players once in a while. I mean, think about like John Lester right now in a keeper league. Like his value relative to what it might be in the next year or two is probably at an all-time low.
Yeah.
Or he's just broken and he's bad forever. But more likely, he's more likely to come back to being like a low to mid 3s ERA guy, good whip guy, than he is to just completely be toast at this point, isn't he? I mean, he's 33. He's got a lot of innings piled up. But I just think a pitcher like that, especially with an injury right now, bottoms out in price and has a chance to give you even more volume with similar quality to some of those young starters who have this perceived higher upside, when in reality, if Lance McCullers comes out and has a few seasons like the one John Lester had in 2015, 205 innings, 207 Ks, 334, 112 for the ratios, you're overjoyed by getting a few years from that. It's like you're looking for that from a guy that hasn't been able to do it yet, when there's a guy that's done it several times who is much cheaper because of the format.
Well, once you own the skills, et cetera, they own it and whatever. But is there a dollar price attached to that? If you're buying Lester at $20 or whatever, that's not going to be as great for your salary cap. You have to wait till the price clears to take that advantage. Or, if he's released back into the pool next year, that's when you just kind of buy low on these guys. But then again, you think inflation could affect that in a lot of ways too. So it's like, what price and what burden is attached to them to buy low on them if there's not really a buy low involved? If you're buying Lester at his preseason 2017 price, you're not getting much of a deal there. So, it really depends on when their price is clear, and all that stuff. So, yeah, the thought is definitely right on buying the guy who's done it already and won't be as in demand. But you also don't want to lock yourself into that, expecting that at a price where he failed to meet this past year.
Right. I mean, but I think it's easier to trade. It's easier to get a deal done, at least if you're making a trade for Arrieta or Lester or Cueto, especially right now. Cueto might be at the point
Arrieta's,
you don't go after him. Arrieta's pitching really well.
Yeah. So
but
that's a little different.
But his arc, and I was one of the first to kind of jump off the Jake Arrieta train. I thought this is bad. This has been a rough second half, slow start. He's made some adjustments, having a lot of success now. It seems more sustainable. It's just going to be easier to get a deal done in a keeper league for Arrieta than it's going to be for McCullers or Paxton in most cases. Because we just get so drunk with upside potential sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, depends on if you're competing next year in a dynasty league too. You'll take on some of the known guys that people want to rebuild by ditching. So Arrieta, I think he's going to be still in high demand. Maybe that's where you jump off, because maybe you sell him high though, because if his price will be the highest of all these Cubs guys, that might be a little bit more of a burden of proof there.
How about like Tanaka right now? We just talked about him earlier. Trading for Tanaka in a keeper league shouldn't be that difficult relative to trying to get those younger high upside guys.
Yeah, I think you have a point there. He was. But once again, what did you get him at this past year?
If there are salaries attached, that is a huge wrinkle too. If somebody had to pay inflated sticker price because Tanaka is one of the best veterans available, 25 plus, and you get a hold of him at that price next year, that's a factor. But if it's more of just you can keep anybody, there's no price attached, that makes players like Tanaka, Lester, guys that get priced up in auction formats, makes them more appealing as keepers because you're not absorbing salary.
I agree. Definitely the context matters here.
All right, we got one last topic on this Tuesday. We talk about it a lot on Tuesdays. What's been in your glass, Tim? You let me down last week. Not really. I mean, you said you were drinking cocktails. You've kind of ascended to a higher class than me in terms of alcohol. Did you drink any beer this weekend?
Well, you know what? You picked the right week to ask, because I certainly made up for last week's nonsense.
Good. Throw the gin out in the dumpster.
Yeah. Well, I've had a couple events this week too. I went to a WWE event over at Barclays Center, which is always a good time. A lot of beer involved. In the pregame is up to that. Logical Choice triple IPA from Pizza Port and AleSmith, 10%, amazing, smooth IPA, Imperial IPA that tasted like that. I recommend it. You won't even notice it's 10%. Two of my favorite San Diego breweries for one that makes a good one. And then a Sculpin with dinner. And then before that, I actually had the Iron Maiden beer. From the metal band, Maiden. I think it was a small British brewery. I forget the name of it. If you like the ESBs, I don't usually like the ESBs, but I'm gonna try the Iron Maiden. It was good. No complaints there. Sunday, post a beach trip with the lady. Stone Tangerine Express IPA, beautiful. Tangerine. They make it with the puree, so I guess that intensifies the flavor a bit. So that was really nice. And the end of the weekend with a Founders Oatmeal Stout Nitro, and beautifully crisp. Nothing, the nitro beers. If they do a really good stout and nitro, you usually get it.
Usually very, very smooth. So yeah. It's a nice little beer weekend that you put together there.
Busy.
Very, very, very busy. The beach beer is optimal this time of year. Two more on my ledger. One local Madison beer. It's a little hard to get outside of this area, but it's called Champagne Tortoise from Carbon 4. They make an IPA called Fantasy Factory that some people may have heard of before. I'm going to try to bring it to Arizona. So if you're going to First Pitch, hopefully there'll be some Carbon 4 stuff available down there. And then another beer, Hazelnut Imperial Stout, which comes from an untitled art brewing project that's also local to this area. I thought it got a lot better as I was drinking it because it was out of the fridge. And I think a lot of times when you're talking about imperial stouts, you need them to kind of come up the temperature a little bit because cold is not what you're looking for. You're looking for some not quite room temperature either, kind of in between fridge and room temperature. So the last half of that beer was significantly better than the first half of that beer.
Right. People say about Guinness being served extra cold or whatever. You don't always want to do that. You don't want to lump that into the same category. So yeah, like coming up to what, like maybe like 50, something like that is what I would think.
45 to 50, I think, is kind of that range where it's a little cool, but it's almost beginning to get warm, I think is what you're looking for with those extra boozy
sounds good.
Malt bombs especially. Good hazelnut flavor on that one. Definitely had a really good nose. Like it's kind of a weird thing to say, but the nose on that beer was better than the actual taste itself.
Well, hazelnut's prominent, so yeah.
It didn't taste bad. It just smelled even better than it tasted.
So that influences you as well, though. If the smell's there, you'll incorporate that somewhat into your senses and have the nice full experience out of it. Even if you said the taste is not as strong. So yeah, either way, it's a good experience. It sounds like so.
A little bit of a boozy punch at the end, though. Of course, double-digit ABV. A lot of times the stouts that are doubles, you're not getting away with not noticing it. Sometimes you can.
Yeah,
nitro helps on that.
Right, the Belgians you don't because they're always very. I don't want to say syrupy for lack of a better term, but they're definitely you can taste more of the malts in there.
Yeah, Eno has described that as like bananas as the flavor that you get at the end sometimes of the Belgians, and I
maybe
it's that distinct kind of sweetness at the end. I like that on the Belgians, but some people are definitely put off by it. But yeah, I think we also had a question from a frequent listener who was at Foley's for the first time. I tried to guide him on Twitter towards the Ommegang 3 Philosophers because they usually have that available.
I had it last time I was there, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned it as something. Yep. I had it last time I was there for Tout Wars. Their tap list changes enough to where I can't quite make that call from about 1,000 miles away all the time. So
let me know.
Philosophers is the way to go.
Yeah, 3 Philosophers is usually the most Ommegang stuff's on there. They have a lot of Southern Tier, upstate New York as well is really good. But yeah, they have like 3 or 4 at least new ones each time I'm there that I'm like, oh, I should try that. But it's sometimes it's very much rotates even during the day, like, oh, we're already out of this type of thing. But yeah, I mean, hey, if that listener wants to meet me at Foley's, we can go through the list together. So absolutely, always a good time there.
I would need to find a way to like restrict how often I go to Foley's if I ever live in New York. Like I'd have to have a rule, like at my house.
Yeah.
one visit per week max, or one visit every other week max would probably have to be like where I settle in because. Too many times I would just end up there and the early baseball games have started and then 6 hours would pass and I'd still be there.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
I'm happy I live an hour train ride from the city, so at least it's built-in control on that. So yeah, I would be the same thing. I have to curb my addictions, but the city does have a lot of alternatives if you're looking for something else. But yeah, Foley's always has treated us well for Tout Wars and so many other sports things. So yeah, if that person wants to have a drink with me at some point when he's in the city, let's go for it. So
yeah, I think it was Steven, Injury Steven, who was
yes.
There. Okay. 6 Point Bengali, I think, pops up on their tap list a lot. I like that one quite a bit.
A lot of
too.
6 Point, yeah.
Definitely more of like a New York specialty. You can get a lot of other places. They sell it in cans here, but one to get fresh when possible. That's going to wrap things up for this episode of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Again, if you like this pod, please take a few moments to leave us a nice rating and review. We really appreciate those of you who've already done that. It's gone a long way to support the work we've done this season. All ears for mailbag questions and topics this time of year. Hit us up. fantasybaseballpodcast@gmail.com. He's at Tim_Heaney. I'm at Derek VanRiper on Twitter. Todd and I are back with you on Wednesday. Have a great day.